Hello, everyone, and welcome back to us here at Lakeside, our Roundtable series. We're going to be continuing our different perspectives conversations tonight. But for those of you who haven't joined us before, we're just thankful to have you with us. And what this kind of is, it's a theological decathlon. We talk about some different topics from a biblical perspective and just musings on godly life, godly living, and from different people's walks in life. And get to share our testimonies and kind of get to know our leaders and our community a little more through this process in the last few weeks. And it's been something that we've really enjoyed as a church. So we thank you for joining in with us. Tonight, I'm just going to let them introduce themselves and who all we have here this evening. Unfortunately, Pastor Tyler was unable to join us this evening as he has a board meeting. And my wife, Brittany, who usually sits right here, is actually out doing photography at the moment. So she's unable to be here as well. But even though we only have three of us, we're three strong. So we're going to have a good conversation tonight. But I'll let Miss Lynn kind of lead off here and just name and...
My name is Lynn Davies. I'm the women's pastor here. I have been here for about 4 years and women's pastor for about 3.
I'm Justin. I'm an associate pastor here. I kind of do a little bit of everything, whatever needs to be done, and that's kind of me.
Yeah. I'm Zandy. I'm the youth pastor here at Lakeside.
So this evening, we're going to get to talk about some things. We mentioned it before a few weeks ago. It's actually one of the most responded to live streams that we had from the Roundtable series. And we discussed if women had a role in ministry. Now, obviously, I'm sitting here with 2 women leaders, so that's obviously the case. But we want to take another opportunity to emphasize what ministry looks like from a female perspective, because there are difficulties and challenges that come along with that service and role. And however, just like Scripture, we kind of touched on some of those topics with great women in Scripture, from Deborah, the prophetess and the judge of the nation of Israel, to Jael, to Ruth, to Esther, to Phoebe in the New Testament, Priscilla, his wife. You know, all these different great women, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus. There were so many women who are integral to Christ's story. Even if you go back to the origins of humanity with Adam and Eve in the garden, Eve was not an afterthought. God knew and He intended. So there's a purpose and an intention and God's imprint on women just as much in the sense that it is men. So tonight we just kind of wanted to give an opportunity for these ladies to kind of share some of their stories so we could get to know what their roles they serve, but also to see ministry from a woman's perspective, because I can't give you that. So if y'all want to jump into it, just kind of wherever y'all want to roll with it.
Where do we want to roll with it, Miss Lynn?
I can share some of my early experiences in ministry. Actually, the way that I got into ministry, I was just a layperson at my church, the church I was going to several years ago. It's a church here in Eastman. And so I was getting some opportunities to go outside the church and speak, but yet I was just a layperson. And so, people were saying, well, you should be in the ministry. But that was not something that I went looking for. And so I said, Lord, I put out my fleece. I said, Lord, if you want me to be in the ministry, let my pastor ask me, because the thing is that when people, in that church felt called into the ministry, they would go and tell the pastor that they felt called into the ministry. So because I wasn't like raring to be in the ministry, I said, okay, Lord, you let him come to me. And so he came to me. I was as an African woman, I was getting some opportunities to go and do some teaching at some of the Caucasian churches here. And I hate using that word, but Caucasian churches here. But anyway, so my pastor came to me and he said, you're getting more opportunities to preach than my other preachers here in the church. And so he said, if God has called you into the ministry, let's do it the right way. You come. And what we call a trial sermon, if you've ever heard of that before. Have y'all ever heard?
Yes.
So we had that.
The man hasn't, but the woman
has.
The
woman has.
I'm kidding. I guess it went well for you, though.
Yeah, it did. It went really well. So he said, let's do it the right way. Let's let you do a trial sermon. So he scheduled me a time to speak to the church, and I did. And so it kind of started from there. And then my husband and I, we did jailhouse ministry for years. And so then, and it's like, I was at that church for about 11 years. And so I was one of the ministers. And so there was no like different callings or whatever. We were just ministers. So I ministered as he asked me to, because I've never, I don't go up to a pastor and say, can I preach? I feel like when it's time for me to preach, I feel like the Lord will let my pastor know. And then, he'll say, okay, can you speak this Sunday or whatever? And so we spoke as the pastor asked us to speak in that church. So then I left there and I was at another church for about 17 years. And my husband and I were elders at that church. And I didn't preach there, but we were elders there. And so and then I was also on the ministry team. We had a ministry team, then we had elders. So that was my experience there until I came to Lakeside. And so I'll let Zandy talk a little bit, then I'll come back to.
Well, my background is forever. I grew up a pastor's kid, so I feel like I've always been around ministry, even if I wasn't technically the minister. Probably the first time, I was a youth leader when I was, probably still too young to be a youth leader as a youth. I led worship a good bit, just like I do here. And when I was probably 16, 17, we had no children's pastor at our church, and we were growing really quick, and they asked me to step in, so I did. I was a kids pastor for about 2 years until they found somebody, which I had a blast. Not called to children's ministry, but it was good. But thankful they found someone. It's not my calling. Kudos to whoever does it. So was in children's ministry for a few years, and then, my church experience has been weird as far as church to church, looking back at different seasons. But mostly my leadership has been in worship. And it always kind of has been. When I got to Lakeside, I came here for probably almost a year and never, I came in, I left. I came in, I left. I might even leave early. Okay. Pastor Tyler used to shake everybody's hand at the back door, and I would go around the back to dodge him. I did not want anybody to know I was here. It was kind of like a rest period for me. I was like, I just want to receive. Until God started kind of urging me, hey, why are you here if you're not going to serve and you're not going to get involved? And I've given you all these things. And so I was like, okay. So I got somebody to introduce me to our worship pastor and got involved with worship. Youth ministry definitely came out of the blue. Justin knows this because we just all walked through it. It was a great time. But really, really long story short, I thought I was going to kind of step in until they found someone, kind of like usual, and ended up not leaving. Ended up having God just not leave me alone until I said yes, even though I tried to say no a good bit. That's kind of, I guess, my background into youth ministry. I've been here 2 years, 3 years? I don't know, because that interim time was weird, but 2 or 3 years as the youth pastor. And also, kudos to whoever does youth ministry. Yes. But at least I'm called there, and so I do put up with all of them. But no, they're great. It's been a ride. It's been a ride.
I also did children's ministry too. Not the first time I ever told you guys this, but I did. But I'm like Zandy, that was not my calling. Hats off to anybody who does it. We have great children's pastors here, and I hope they stay there. But that was not my calling.
I feel like a lot of times, this is going to sound arrogant, but, I feel like you could stick me in anywhere and I would serve, and I would do an okay job. I don't think I'm bad at most things. And some of that's just from growing up in ministry and just knowing what to do. But just because you maybe are even talented somewhere, or that you can do something, doesn't always mean that's where you're called. And so you have to kind of find your gifting versus just where you're talented sometimes, or where you might be kind of good at something. I remember one week I was walking out the back, and Amanda, Pastor Tyler's wife, handed me her kid and was like, will you just hold him for just a second? I promise he won't cry. I was like, sure. So I held him, and he was like half asleep, so I just rocked him. I was singing to him, Well, he starts crying, obviously, because it was me. So she was like, he never cries unless he's hungry. So I gave him a bottle. Well, Tyler walks in, and I'm holding this little baby, feeding him. And he goes, oh, my gosh, we need to put you on the nursery schedule. I said, no. I said, I love you, and I'll hold your baby any day, but I am not meant for the nursery. That is not my calling. And he laughed and laughed and laughed about it. And, but sometimes that's how it is. So you got to be careful with, when you say yes, because you could end up somewhere that God really, not that he doesn't want you, but, just in a different space than where he's really calling you to. So, and honestly, and this might be stereotypical, but I think even sometimes as women, we want to say yes because we just want to help,
Absolutely.
more. We just want to say, yeah, let me do it. Don't worry about it. Let me just step in where I'm needed. And so I think that can be a downfall for us sometimes in ministry, is saying yes too much and kind of getting comfortable in the wrong spaces when God has more for you or has something different for you.
Absolutely. And I've done that several times too. But then I also, when it came to doing kids ministry or youth ministry again, I said no because I knew that was not my calling. I didn't want to, the Bible says your gifts will make room for you. So I wanted to make room for somebody else's gift.
That's funny.
I find that funny just because I know our church is kind of a different type of congregation, and we honor our women leaders, and we look at them to step into that mantle of leadership. But so often women kind of get shuffled into nursery or children's ministry. It's kind of almost ideological. This is where yours should be. This is where you should be effective. But I've seen so many other things with Zandy and youth ministry. I've seen our youth grow and flourish because I believe just as we need strong men leaders in our churches, it's just as equally important to have strong women leaders as well.
Yes.
And just kind of going back to what y'all said, I can't speak from a woman's perspective, but I can speak from my wife's. That is something that she had to look. You learn to guard your yeses, and I think even with her, just watching her do ministry over the years that we've done ministry together, she'll say yes because she feels like she, as a woman, is kind of obligated to help instead of no. And that's something that she's said, and she would, if she was sitting here beside me, she would say, "Guard your yeses and guard your no's."
Always.
I agree.
She says that that's something that she really has learned have to deal with, because you can throw yourself into a ministry that you may not be equipped for, and not to say that you can't fulfill a role and be good at it. You can be great at it, but we look as the kingdom to be the most effective we can possibly be.
Absolutely.
And anything short of giving him all of the glory is cutting him short.
That's
And like you
right.
said, kind of mentioned with preaching and things like that, if your pastor or your leader asks you to and brings you into that, it feels like a God-given driven thing. I'm very similar in that. I don't go to Tyler and say, "Hey, Tyler, I've got an amazing message. It's really good. You need to let me get up there and preach." I get that word and I sit on it until God brings it to season. So I think that's another important thing, especially with women in ministry, is that knowing that you're not localized to serve in nursery or in children's ministry, even though we have some incredible and phenomenal children's leaders out there who are women. And I am so grateful and thankful for you, because you help me not have to go over there and do what you do, because I can, and I love kids, don't get me wrong, but you fill that role so eloquently.
Yes.
But from that, is there any kind of other, like, maybe struggles or difficulties that you've had as a woman in maybe leadership or ministry? I know for Brittany specifically, sometimes she feels like as a woman she may, and this isn't necessarily specific to church, but doesn't feel like as a woman she's always heard as often as maybe her men or male counterparts. Even in this, sometimes she has to say those things to me, honestly. I'm just being really transparent. So is that some topics or subjects that you all have had to experience kind of similar to that?
Well, I went to a church once, and I'm still don't really understand what happened. But so my pastor, he asked me to go down to it was down south, church down south, and speak. He said that they called him and asked him if he would send one of his ministers to speak, do a morning and an afternoon service. And so he asked me would I do it, and I said yes. And so I still don't know what it was, but I went down, and they barely spoke. They barely spoke. I mean, I'm talking about anybody in the church. So I preached the first service, and so they were having like a pastor appreciation or anniversary or something. So like we had dinner, and then I was going to speak the second service. Well, I did, and so we had first service, and so after the first service, everybody was laughing and talking, and nobody was speaking to me and my husband and my kids. We were just kind of there, and I didn't know if they were going to offer us a meal. I mean, it was like, what in the world? I was like, and I still don't know exactly what happened. But anyway, so we sat around, and finally somebody spoke to us and asked us if we wanted something to eat, because here we were out of town, and we were, I was preaching a morning and an evening service, so it was going to be a long time before we got back. So they finally asked us asked us, do we want something to eat? And so we ate with them, and just maybe 2 or 3 people spoke. I still don't know exactly what happened. And then after we ate, preached the second service, and needless to say, we left. and I'm still not sure. So I don't know I don't know what it was, but it's not only do you have to learn to speak the word, but there are just other church behavior, culture that you have to learn as well. And so it was a learning process. I can remember being invited to speak at a church in Wrightsville, and this was my own era because I could preach the word, but I was immature in that in just learning. So I remember I was, like I said, it was a little church in Wrightsville, Georgia, and so I preached, but in my message, there was I spoke in tongues, okay, and so I will be first to say I was out of order. I was out of order because it wasn't a tongue to be interpreted. It was just praise like. And so they were not happy. I mean, they.
Oh goodness.
Well, they didn't say anything, but I could feel it. I could feel it. And once I finished preaching, it was quiet. And so we I got my stuff and I left.
You can always feel it for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know that's not secluded to a gender, but more women that I know, the men will be walking around and they'll be like so not knowing what's going on, and then the women walk in and we're all like, what's happening? And they're like, what are you talking about? We're like, no, what's going on? And we're so much more intuitive in that way. So that's kind of funny because I'll do that sometimes too. Absolutely. And I'll be like, okay, I'm not even 100% sure. Nobody said anything, but I just know. Like you just know. Yeah, you can feel it. It's funny.
Absolutely.
I think for me, like, again, there's so many, like the stories are endless to tell. But probably most recently, being a youth pastor has been so different. When I was a worship leader, again, not trying to put stereotypes, but this is how I think. When I'm a worship leader, it's easy for me to just step up and lead worship and sing like a little songbird because I'm a girl. Absolutely. And it's like, oh, she sounds so pretty, and it's, whatever. And so it's fine. Even a children's pastor there was no issue. Not saying there's an issue here, just saying there was no issue. But when I stepped into being a youth pastor, it was so much different because it's what other people regard as a man's role. And so for me, there was so much respect that I had to earn that probably somebody else stepping in as a guy wouldn't have had to earn. Mm-hmm. It was, well, can she handle it? And what's going to happen if this happens? Is she going to get stressed out? Is she emotional? All the words that y'all like to use for us women that just make me want to strangle people. And so it was like I had to constantly earn respect. Of course, also, I'm single, so it was always, well, can you do this without a man? Yeah. And I'm like, what does a man have to do with me preaching the gospel? Of course, not saying it wouldn't be a huge help, just any help. But I was like, what does that have to do with anything? Why am I not qualified enough? Just because I'm a woman, being able to step into a role and preach to these kids, And so for me, I think that was a big challenge because, again, when you're like, I'm the youth pastor, they're like, oh. And you see it on their face like, but wait, you're a girl, which I kind of find funny because probably the youth pastor I had the longest growing up was a woman as well. And she used to talk about the same things like, and you would refer to your youth pastor and say she, and they'd be like, wait, what? She? Because people don't think that's a role that a woman normally is typically going to have. And so I've just, like I said, had to feel like I'm earning people's respect, not even just kids. Gosh, those guys give me a run for my money, okay? I have to assert, myself and my dominance so that they know, hey, I'm not just some pushover.
Absolutely.
With the girls, I have to set boundaries because I can't be your bestie. With parents, again, it's like, are you equipped to do this? Are you going to be okay in here with all these crazy children by yourself? So for me, stepping into a man's role versus, if you're the ladies pastor, everybody expects you to be a lady. Like, it would be weird if we had a men's ladies pastor, And so for me, that's just been kind of a struggle. Not really anymore. And again, it's not a problem within our leadership, but just perspective-wise to the world and to everybody else. It's like, okay, I've got to prove something. And, a lot of times I have to sit back and spend time with God about that.
Yes.
Because he's like, you don't have to prove anything. I placed you here. I called you here. I appointed you here. You didn't ask to be here. I certainly did not. Again, if y'all just only knew, like it's like, how do you even end up some places? But so I have to spend time alone with God and say, okay, where do I need to be more assertive? Where do I need to stand my ground, and where do I need to let go of other people's perspective of what I have to be and what I should be, because I have to focus on what he wants me to do and not what other people expect. So that's kind of a thing for me, or it has been.
And that is a position that you don't take lightly, because being a leader over a ministry, God is holding you responsible. And so, and I'm not talking about you, Zandy, I'm just talking about period. It is something you don't take lightly, because you don't want to damage anyone. You always have to be careful that you're setting a good example. And then, praying for the people that, that we pastor, and, and just trying to pull the gifts out of them, and also your goal is to reach people, to make sure that everyone feels that they have a place. Even sometimes, even for those who, just like, don't, I'm okay, but you still want to, you want to be one big happy family, but sometimes it's not always like that.
Right.
But I do praise God that I do have a good team of ladies that work with me. So we've recently added, some more ladies, and I always like to have people who have gifts that I don't have. And I'm not that creative. I'm not that highly technologically inclined. So, it's my desire to learn, because we can learn wherever our deficiencies are.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that God gave each one of us gifts, and I look at it as like, even as for the ministry team, each one of us have a piece that makes the whole. And I look at the women that's working with me, is that each one of us makes the whole. Each part makes the whole. When everyone brings their gift to the table, then the church can flourish. And so I love working with the ladies. I really do. And my goal is to reach more ladies, and I love for our ladies to have the opportunity to fellowship with the other women in the community. I love that, and I think it's good for our community.
Yeah. I think pinging off of what you said about, everything's not always just family and roses and hugs and whatever.
No.
I think as women, you're kind of expected to just let things go and keep the peace and things like that. Justin's going to laugh when I say this, but I'm very much not that human. Not that I don't make peace, but I'm a very dominant type personality. And so for me, it's hard because you do have to be the bad guy sometimes. And unfortunately, when, if you decide I'm going to lay down the hammer today, it's just a guy just being assertive and just being whatever. And when it's me, it's, well, she's emotional, or did she have a bad day, or did she whatever. And so it's really hard, to speak your mind and like stand up for your ministry, stand up for your people. And like you said from the very beginning, you said if Brittany was here, she would say about being heard sometimes. And sometimes you don't feel like you are, because you feel like people excuse that assertiveness or that voice for other things because you're a woman.
Absolutely.
And again, not saying necessarily here, but in all of my years, in ministry of all kinds, that's definitely a big challenge. Because again, you can't change other people's perspective of you. So if you're a woman and you're watching, good luck. I'm definitely not going to tell you it's going to be easy. It's not.
No.
And you have to spend a lot of time before the Lord,
Yep.
because that can also build offense really, really quick against other people.
Absolutely.
And you have to be like, you know what, God, I'm giving that to you.
Yes.
Because again, that's not who you made me. So let's do away with that.
Absolutely.
Everybody's always going to have an opinion. I know, especially as women, what we wear,
Oh,
what
yes.
our hair looks like, what
Yes.
our makeup
Have to
looks
be
like.
very careful.
If y'all knew the stress before live streams on Sundays, on Wednesdays, and we're like, this doesn't look right, or we watch it back and we nitpick ourselves because a guy can get up here and it's like, meh. But we get up here and even we do it. Look at her earrings, look at her shirt, even if it's good, that's so cute. Look at her nails, I like this, and we'll get picked apart. Whereas as guys, that won't happen to them either. And so I feel like the expectation, honestly, as a woman in ministry, is much higher.
Absolutely.
It's much higher because I have to think of a scope of things. Now I have to be a good mother. I have to be a good wife. I have to be a good pastor.
Yes.
I have to look right. I have to speak well. I have to
Absolutely.
make peace. I have to, always be on my game. And so it's exhausting. It's doable, and it's a great time.
It is.
But you do have to stay before the Lord on it because there's so much expectation on you as a woman.
And I agree with what you said there. I think women just in general, whether it be in the church or just in the secular world, there's a standard and an image that people expect women to have that men just kind of don't have to worry with. I mean, for example, and I can use this as a real example because it's something I've seen personally, where different churches have different styles and different influences and different things like that. But where someone could be, say, you had someone on stage playing an instrument that was a male, they could wear a hat, no one's got a qualm, no issue, no concern. And someone might have an issue with it, but they won't speak up or vocalize it because it's not really that big of an issue.
Right.
But let a female step on stage with a dress or a skirt that's a little above the knee, not much. And it'd be 110 degrees outside,
right.
but then that's a
Absolutely.
problem. That's
Yes.
that's not good. That's not. I think that's a real issue. I think that's a heart issue in the church world and obviously in the secular world too. But I absolutely can agree with that, and I know that Brittany's been picked apart left from right, and especially because if anyone out there kind of has met my wife, she flows by her own beat and her own drum, and she
does.
loves the Lord with everything she
I
does.
know she does.
Whether she's got blue hair, blonde hair, or pink hair, she loves
And
the
we'll
Lord.
go through all of
And
those this year.
She will cycle through those whenever she feels fit, and I have no issues with that whatsoever.
Good.
But there are people out there who are more traditional than us that
Yeah.
do have qualms with that. But I think that's a big issue because they don't necessarily look at the heart of a woman, where they look at the image of a woman. And I think that's
They
where a
do.
lot of the issues of women in leadership positions come, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. I know for a fact because when women doing correction in ministry from an area of leadership,
Yes.
I cannot fathom how hard that is to address or correct someone that's in your ministry as a woman leader, because I've had to double down on people before. And I say double down, I'll explain what that means in a second, where Brittany will go to someone in the area of leadership and ministry and she'll correct somebody. And then because she's a woman, they'll flip the script, like you said, and they'll place that on, well, they're just being emotional.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I have to come back and say, no, here's what the word says about
That's
how you
right.
behave.
Yep.
Here's what God says. It has nothing to do with the emotions that she may or may not have displayed. The fact of the matter is that you didn't do or you didn't line up correctly with the word, and there's correction in that. And now you've heard it from her, and because you rejected that from her, now I have to come on the scene and tell you also.
Right.
But I think that's another big thing that as a church that we have
Yeah.
to strive to do is, as leaders, buckle arms and have accountability for each other.
Absolutely.
Because I know, and there are sometimes, even with me, there are sometimes that as a leader, we have to be corrected too.
Absolutely.
It's not excusing that. I'm not saying our
No.
leaders are
Yeah.
perfect. We are definitely not. We don't believe in that
No.
model of leadership that we're it's not the papacy in here. We don't believe that I am Jesus and I don't do
Right.
any wrong.
Absolutely.
I am still
in the process.
in the process of sanctification, and I'm
Yes.
getting better daily, but it's a slow process sometimes.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine how difficult that is because, like I said, I've seen that firsthand.
Well, we talked. Was it our first round table we did stuff about women?
Yeah,
Was
I
it
think
very
it was the first or second.
You know, we talked about women in ministry and what people believed as far as, you know, all of that. And, you know, of course here, there's no issues with women being in leadership, but you have people that come from all over the place. And so some people end up on your team that don't believe you're qualified. And so it's
Right.
very hard to correct people that don't even believe biblically you should be where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think definitely to any of our brothers, if you see that, please help us.
Yes.
Because those are areas that no matter what we say, no matter how much I point him to truth, he's not going to believe me because it's coming from me. So if you're a guy in ministry, you know, and you do see something like that happening, help us out, you know, stand up for us as well because, you know, we're not going to be able to be empowered until everybody's on the same page. You know, lately, all we have seen pretty much is Black Lives Matter. And we can't expect things to change unless white people get on the same page.
Absolutely.
And it's the same in this. You can't expect everybody to get on the same page with women if the men don't get on the same page and go, hey, we support them, we love them, we believe in them. You know, we think they're qualified. We think that they're called and there for a reason. And so I would encourage anybody, if you see it, to make sure that you're being supportive of the women because it is just that much more difficult to have to try and correct people like that or, you know, in fear of coming across as something else.
Yeah.
So.
Right. You know, like you said, in fear of coming across, you know, as you know it all or you know, just because you've been in ministry for a long time. And so there are areas where, you know, I probably need to be a little more assertive, but coming into a church where I only knew a few people here, there, you know, I definitely had some challenges. I mean, I had some challenges. But you know, I prayed through them and shared them with Pastor Tyler and Amanda, which they knew of some of them, but it was a real struggle at one time. It was a real struggle at one time, and so but I made it through. It was, I mean, and I don't want to go into all of it, but there were times when I shed some tears and I was like, well, Lord, did I, you know, am I doing the right thing, you know? But I, you know, I weathered it. You know, I weathered it, and as a leader, this is one thing that all leaders experience, but I think it makes us better people.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, people get offended with you, and they can stay offended with you, but you cannot stay offended as a leader.
Yep.
Amen.
And that teaches you to forgive so that you can move on because I still have to work with this person. I still have to minister to this person. I still want the best for this person. And that is one big thing that leaders have to learn and that we have to do is to keep it moving. You know, not be offended, or if you're offended, let it go because you are in a position where you have to minister to other people, and so you know you just can't stay offended.
Absolutely.
My kids definitely offend me all of the time. No, I'm kidding. But sometimes you're like so upset or you're so mad,
Yeah.
and I'm like, but you know what? Come next week, they're gonna walk in, and I still got to hug them. And I still got to
Absolutely.
preach to them, and they still
Yeah.
need as much Jesus as I do. So
Absolutely.
you do. You have to be so quick to drop
You do.
offense.
You do.
And you know, you were talking about, you know, just getting before the Lord, and I
Yeah.
shed some tears, and man, I can't even tell you how many times. I've
Absolutely.
been in Brittany and Justin's house, or Tyler's come in, and I'm crying in the youth room, you know, and I hate to cry in front of people. So, like, if you find me doing it, it's
hate
the
it too.
worst. I'm like, I don't want to, what? I'm like, I don't want to ever, you know, I don't want to come across weak
Yeah.
just because I am showing any emotion.
Absolutely.
So they'll find me, and I'll just be a wreck. But I respect that. Just saying that to you, because I've never talked to you about that. But I respect that you get down and you shed tears over it, because you know what? If you don't, do you care? You know,
Absolutely.
Are you really caring if you're not getting before God over it and you're not really showing that emotion? Because to me, you know, when I don't, when I'm just like whatever, and I'm just, you know, that's not a good space to be. I would much rather be overly emotional or over compassionate or really in turmoil over my kids or my ministry, and caring about it a lot than just to kind of blow it off, just so that other people don't have to see that. I don't view that as weakness. I think it's awesome when you can get before God like that, and I think more people need to know that, because whether you're a man or a woman, when you step in ministry, it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, people think ministers just come and, you know, we just preach and we're happy, you know, and we just hang out at the church all day and, like, you know, just whatever.
They have no idea.
Yeah, they have no idea what it takes, and they have no idea what it's like to really pour your heart and soul and your whole life into people. And so it's difficult, and it's normal. If that's you, or you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, or I feel like I'm going crazy all the time, you know, that's normal, man or a woman. That means you care, and that means God's working on your heart and working on your heart towards people, and that is a never-ending process.
And you know what? Really, it's a dying to the flesh, which is good for us. You know, nobody wants to hurt, or nobody wants to offend or be offended. But when you have to continue loving someone, and you have a suspicion of the way that they feel about you, you know, just because of behavior, but you have to keep loving them, that's part of cutting away the flesh.
Yeah.
And it's saying, you know, I'm going to put the kingdom of God before my feelings, you know. And so because God didn't call us to judge anyone anyway, you know. He said, whatever you judge someone with, you'll be judged for that same thing. Yeah. So it is a dying to the flesh process.
Absolutely, and you know, that sometimes hard is very. It's easy to say, hard to do. And
do you think that's harder for men or women? Sorry, that just popped into my head.
That's a difficult question to answer, because
obviously that's not the same across the board. But
I say because I can speak from my personal lens. It's harder for me than my wife, but also she's more in tune with her emotions, and
right.
and that's not just because she's a woman thing. That is a God-given gift she has. Right. She has discernment on that emotional scale, and she can just pick people up out of the congregation and weep and cry and mourn over their hurt and celebrate their victories without even knowing what's necessarily going on. That's just a God-given gift she has. So that's a hard comparison for me, because I really don't have another person to display or say that with. For me, as a man, and you can probably understand some of the emotional energy I'm about to throw out here. Probably. I get very frustrated, very
not
easily
you,
with
Justin,
things. I know, not me. I'm so calm all the time. That's the reason I'm calm all the time. I can't be emotional. Because I mean, when God called me into ministry, He placed a visceral passion inside of me. Yeah. It is a unending, unyielding flame that consumes everything it touches. My struggle is when someone has offense towards me, I have to realize that it's a spiritual warfare.
Absolutely.
And I can go and I can cut that person to the quick, because God has given me a gift in grafting words together that can diminish someone to this small in a heartbeat. But my war is not with that person. Yeah. My war is with the Spirit.
That's right.
So instead of attacking that, I will divert it, and I will almost sometimes, and this is going to sound terrible to say, almost a hateful spite of the enemy. Say, I'm going to love them with everything I have, just to show you you have no control or power or authority in this. Watch me love them more than you can make them hate me. Absolutely. So that's a tough one for me to answer. It is. When you can use anger as a gift of passion, you know, it takes some really good manipulating there on occasion.
I think most guys, though, are much more, like, you're much more geared that way towards more like, I don't know the word. I don't want to say anger again. It's not like anger, but it's just this justice of like, no, and it's very assertive. Yeah. Whereas we, like you said, for the most part, women are more in tune and can go, you know, let me lay this down, or let's think about it, let's communicate, let's process. Yeah. Because I've even with you and Brittany, you know, I don't know if you remember this. I remember one day coming in the church, and y'all were just like, y'all were not fussing at each other, but you were fussing about things to each other. And I walked in, and I was like, what is happening? And you just started spouting off, and I'm just looking at you like, what? And so finally, he just like takes a breath, and I said, are you done? And you were like, what? And I was like, go to the altar and get your stuff together. And I mean, I like lit into Justin, and he just sat there, and he put his head down. And in a few minutes, he was like, okay. And he got up and he came to the altar, and Brittany was like, ha ha, you know. I turned around and I was like, your turn. And she was like, And I was like, what's wrong with you? And so I kind of lit into Brittany, and I was like, you should be on your face. And I was like, why are you mad at him? Go love your husband, you know. And she was like, you're right. And we all ended up here in the altar together. But Brittany was overflowing with this emotion, and I've got to fix it. I need to figure out who I need to talk to and all these things. And Justin just wanted to, like, you know, punch a hole in the wall, you know, because it's just a difference in the way that we approach things. I think for the most part, men and women are just different in that way. So that's why I was asking, like, if you thought it was easier or harder for a man or a woman, because I know that's not technically a man's strong suit, to just be so in touch and, you know, whatever, surrender because you want to assert, not give up.
And I think that's definitely a masculine trait that God's given to mankind. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, obviously. At the same time, I can be very direct and blunt and cut. But on the flipped coin, I think Brittany coined it with my personality one time. She said, you confuse people sometimes because they don't know how to approach you, because you're either going to give them a hug or stab them in the back, and they don't know which one you're coming with. So, but and that's not necessarily like how I actually operate in ministry. But kind of like Zandy was saying, there are times where I do come to the altar, and anytime we're at the church and we're pouring things out, that's why we come here. We don't deal with struggle in our household. That is a place of peace. We come here and we lay it on the altar, and we end it here and then go back home. So that's a little thing. So anyone out there, husband-wise, if you have any, take it to an altar first. I promise you, your life will be so much easier, because you can't fight God. But that's a whole different subject.
Is there like an instance where you feel like, you know, I took ministry issues home, and like, how did you deal with that in your marriage? Like, I'm not married, so just asking you that question. How do you deal with that when it enters into a different form of life, and you're stressed and you're crying those tears over ministry, and then how you go home and care for your family when you're caring about other people too?
You know, I think being a counselor, I've learned to be so confidential about everything that I don't ever go into a lot of detail. This is, for example, when I've done marriage counseling, you know, or when I've maybe just talked to a woman one-on-one, and I will tell her, you know, don't go tell your parents every argument that you have with your spouse, because you know that you guys are going to love each other and you're going to get back together, but mama over there is going to be angry with your spouse for a long time. And so I've you know, I shared with him some struggles that I have, but I've not just gone into every detail about every struggle that I've had within the women's ministry. A lot of times I just don't tell anybody. You know, I just pray and then I just kind of work through it. So I just don't tell a lot of things, period. Yeah. You know, just because I've gotten used to doing that.
I mean, you're a guy, but like, what does that look like when Brittany comes home and she's, you know?
You know, that's a kind of different thing, because Brittany is, like I said earlier, she kind of does deal with the emotional discernment. So a lot of things she brings home as far as emotional baggage isn't actually her. Yeah. It's stuff that she has inflicted or pulled from other people. And realistically, that's part of our ministry. So when she comes to me to show me or speak to me on these things, we either do one of two things. I listen to her at the house and we pray there, depending on the situation, or we bring it to the altar here. I mean, realistically, we live really close to the church, so we frequent here pretty often in off hours. But there are times where I have to tell her, okay, I'm not in a place to receive what you're speaking right now. Right. I'm not at a place emotionally. Maybe I've had a difficult day, or maybe as she's been doing ministry with someone else, I've been doing ministry with another lens, And not saying that all ministry is negative, but even, for example, a few days ago, this is just a good reality, is she was dealing with some stuff with her work and with photography and some clients and things like that she was trying to work together and wrap up. And in the middle of that, she was getting bombarded by people who were struggling with life choices, life decisions in ministry, just stuff that we navigate through in ministry on a daily basis. So she comes to me with that, and my day had been jovial. Like, it had been wonderful. It had been the best days. I had done some ministry that day. I had led some people into a deeper walk with Christ. They had opened up their hearts to me. We had shared. They seemed to have received and grown from it. It was just overall, spiritually, it was the best of days. You don't get those often.
Right.
So when she came and she said, let me tell you about this, I said, woo, 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 woo. I'm in the heavenlies right now, and I want to stay here just a little longer. Give me a little more time to rest in this spot before I move. So that's kind of, I guess, that. I don't know if that answered it adequately, but that's a.
Yeah, well, I mean, there wasn't an answer. I was just curious.
But so one thing I want to do before we do close, because we are getting close here, we talked about some of the struggles and some of the difficulties, and we talked about different callings into ministry, because both of you obviously have a call into ministry. And one thing I love to do, and we'll touch on in a minute, is we do love celebrating our leaders here at Lakeside, especially our women leaders, because there is a diverse and difficult world out there. And even from a secular standpoint, women tend to be looked down as not equals, even though scripturally speaking and from a divine standpoint, they are in all means and terms possible. You can go take Genesis and work that out if you don't agree with that. You don't have to go any further. I mean, you could scan through the rest of Scripture, but it's going to support that initial statement. But I want to talk about some of the victories that you've had in ministry. Because one of the things I think, we've talked about the difficulties, but I want people to hear, not only do we celebrate our women leaders, but they thrive here at our congregation. That because I've seen in both of your ministries wonderful, great things happen. I've seen Miss Lynn leading droves of women, bringing them out of different places. I mean, realistically, we can't go a few weeks without me seeing Miss Lynn with some new woman in here. I'm just being honest. That's a gift. And Zandy, I've seen these teams that we've cultivated and worked from children's church all the way into youth until we moved out of youth ministry, absolutely thriving and just flourishing under her ministry. So if y'all just for a few minutes, if you just like to kind of talk about some of those victories that you've seen.
You know, well, one thing that I've been blessed is, like I said, some of the women that was on my team when I initially started here. You know, we would have a Bible study up in one of the upper rooms there when I first came, and it was just amazing seeing those women who were, you know, just kind of quiet and just were kind of here to start to participate in the Bible studies and some of them had opportunities to teach the Bible study that we had, and they were coming in, and it was just amazing the bond that was created up there. And it was just, you know, we would have our Bible study, and sometimes, you know, one of the women would need to be comforted, and we'd put the Bibles down and just comfort her and encourage her. It was just amazing. And so from that, some of the women have you know, they carried that with them, the ability to express themselves and the ability to teach. And so that was just a great thing. It was just amazing, just seeing those women come out and participate. I mean, I just can't tell you what the bond that we shared there. And then another one is the conferences that we've had. In fact, the last conference, it was just amazing. So many women from the other churches in our county. We had 30 churches represented. That's awesome. It was just amazing because when we did the altar call, the altar was almost literally full from one side to the other. And it was people who were who were recommitting, and some of them got saved, and some was just recommitting, and we didn't capture those numbers, but the next time we do, I plan to. But and then seeing so many women from the other churches in Eastman fellowshipping together with our ladies it was just amazing to me, and just blessed. And then just seeing some just come and learn to work in the church and come out, off the benches, so to speak, and have the opportunity to work and share and just the bonds that some of us have had, and as just and keeping those going. You don't ever want to, you want to kind of hold, bring everybody along. So sometimes that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Trying to keep everybody hand in hand.
Yeah.
But it's been some good things have happened here.
I can definitely attest to the women's conference. Like, it grows every year. And you think, wow, this is awesome. And then the next year you're like, whoa, like, we're going to have to find a new building soon. Yes and amen.
Well, even as a man, I haven't come to women's ministry conferences, but I have heard stories
They're incredible.
of outbreaks
They're
and
awesome.
amazing things happening.
Oh,
So
my
I can
goodness.
attest to that, even though I'm not necessarily a direct part.
And we've had some men to ask if they could come.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't know. But some of them have come
Well,
in there
thank
with their
you.
wives.
They just trying to sneak in.
They just trying to sneak in.
They just can't help it.
Absolutely.
Mr. Tyler just got called out.
It's been amazing.
That's funny.
Some others too.
They're all sitting at home going, oh my God.
Yeah.
We didn't
Yeah,
say their name, though. It's okay. No,
Absolutely.
I'm kidding.
I've
They're,
had-
they're
I've had
really
some-
great conferences.
I've had some pastors say, well, can men come too? I don't know now.
We just like to be exclusive. Women
Yeah.
are just like that. We're like,
Once
no,
a
we've had
year.
enough of y'all. Y'all got to go. We got to
Once a
love
year.
Jesus by ourselves today.
Absolutely. Once a year, huh, Brandy?
Just once a
Zandy?
year. That's not too much to ask.
That's right.
That's funny. No, I definitely have had a lot of wins in ministry, more than I thought that I would have, which kind of sounds bad, but definitely more than I could have imagined in the best way. Even if it's something small, like when I took over, I said, well, as a woman, I said, well, can I redo the youth room? Because it doesn't really look the way I'd like it to look. And Tyler was like, oh, yes, well, we can do that. To his surprise, the next week I was pulling boards out of the wall, and he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm starting. And he was like, well, I thought we would have to come up here and do that. I was like, oh no, I'm way ahead of you. You pegged the wrong woman, because I'm gonna get it done. And so
I remember that.
yes, so even stuff like that, they've let me decorate and paint. Those are big wins for me, because I like aesthetics. Big wins with my kids, forming relationships with them. When previous pastors were up there, I taught small group, or I led worship up there some. And so to watch my relationship with them grow has been awesome, bringing them into my life and my home, and just get to spend time with them. I've watched, what was it? It wasn't this past year, it was the one before. We had that day, we all stayed after church, just impromptu, Spirit was moving, and we baptized, 28? 28?
28 students. I think it was 66 people total and 28 students.
Yeah, it was a bunch. Like, I remember being in the baptismal all of a sudden, and Pastor Derek was like, I was like, let me get out. And he was like, no, you're going to baptize them. And I was like, I'm not ready. I was like, I don't think I should be doing this. I wasn't technically the youth pastor at that point, but I remember baptizing kids. Man, what an incredible win. And for them to allow me to do that was incredible. Being at camp is always a win, getting close to them at camp, watching them grow in gifts of the Spirit and in their knowledge and in just their daily walk. Even, since I do love music, we have a worship team up there now that we've crafted, and, trying to grow other ministries. I like to see the growth, and I've been given the ability to be creative in what I want to do.
That's wonderful.
And execute it well. Youth Sundays, nobody says, no. They say, hey, you've got free reign. This is your ministry. And they're fully supportive. And so it's always nice to be able to plan things and do things and be creative. And, even outside of just the kid wins, because, again, you were talking about wins in our leadership and supporting our women. And I feel like they do that, at least with me. I can speak for only me, but, they've done that with me for sure. And everybody's behind me. I'll have 10 guys moving whatever I need moved. I'll be like, I'm not going to do it, but I need this here, you know, and they come and they work for me, and they do an awesome job. And the kids, like I said, just watching them get older and growing, grad Sunday just was like unreal. I couldn't believe they were already, you know, graduating and moving on. And so a lot of ministry wins, and going to have a lot more, so I'm stoked.
Well, with that, I think we're kind of out of time this evening, but I do want to pray over us as well as everyone watching online. But before I do that, I want to say a quick thing. Just growing up in life, I kind of had a view of ministry and women kind of differently than most people, I think, kind of in the traditionalist area have. I grew up with a very strong mother who had been involved in ministry. My grandparents were ministers and still are ministers, to be honest. And I'd grown up in church, even though I really didn't know much about church, because I'd kind of, well, from 5 years old on, we kind of didn't attend until I got saved. So I knew of church, I knew what a strong, godly woman looked like, but I didn't know necessarily the schism that kind of happens in the church world, that women aren't supposed to be able, or technically, lead in different things, to capacities, blah, blah, blah. You know, they have a place in nursery and children's church, but don't step outside of that unless you're in the kitchen. You know, little weird stuff like that I never picked up. I never was trained in that way, so I never had to necessarily unlearn it. But I know that as I was growing up, my dad had a boss at one point, and she's a leader in the community, wonderful woman, loves God. She was attending a church that she had been at for years, and at one Sunday at the altar, it was not a Pentecostal denomination of any sorts, but she spoke with the utterance of tongues, and God revealed and gave her giftings in that. And from that moment, she realized there was more to the story, and kind of had to take a step back and reflect. And she went on a really long journey through life, and is now currently leading ministry, even in our local community, which is just phenomenal to see. And it's been, I mean, I'm looking at probably a 15 to 20 year journey.
Wow.
But with that being said, any women out there who have giftings and leadership capacities and callings, if you are at a place in a body, and I don't want to take anyone from their home, church home, but if you feel as if you have capacity to lead and serve, you can use this place as a training ground. I'm not saying you have to come here and be an attendee and be a member, but use us as the catalyst to push you forward, because we truly believe that God has both given women and men giftings. When you see in Corinthians, when it talks about the gifts of the Spirit, it doesn't limit them to male or female. It says as the Spirit sees fit. And if women can be saved by the same God that we serve and have the same Spirit of God that dwells within us as men, any of you men out there, you have no right to disqualify a woman from any type of leadership in ministry. So with that being said, if you are a woman out there and you feel that prick in your spirit right now, I want you to reach out to us. I want you to get in touch with us. We have wonderful leaders who are women here that can walk you through the ropes of being the most effective you can be for the kingdom of God, because God did not call you to sit still or be quiet.
Absolutely.
Whether you're men or women on that. So with that being said, I want to pray over us this evening. God, I thank you for the generation that you're raising up, the people that you've called, and the gifts of the Spirit which you've given, the utterance of your power and authority that you give and display through mankind, Father. I thank you for your mercies and your tender goodness and your gracefulness, God, for each and every one of us, Lord. As there's people out there listening to this right now, someone has a prick in their spirit, Lord, that you are just calling them, whether it's today or maybe they're watching this live stream 3 days from now at the house at their convenience. They're going to feel a stirring in their soul that you are speaking to them on this, and I ask that you give them the courage and the audacity to reach out and get in touch with us or another local church community where they can plug in and be developed and grow as leaders. And that goes same for men as well. If you are a man out there who is feeling God's calling on your heart, we believe that as a church, we have one of our core values is that everyone has a place. Every person that walks into our church has a place, and that's because God has called all of his people to serve him with everything they have. So I thank you for that this evening, Lord. I just pray over those who will be reaching out to us over the next few days, and I thank you for being a glorious God who is impartial when it comes to loving us and allowing us to serve you. And I thank you for this in Jesus' glorious and precious name. Amen. Thank everyone out there for watching. We'll join you and see you next week, and have a good week.